What's up, horror fans? I'm Anchor Pete, and I'm here with my fellow princes of the universe. I got Dr. ZaiusGoD, Danny right next to me, and down there is Mr. Chris, Future Boy Chris. So, welcome, gentlemen.
Here we are.
And you know what? Each of us are exhausted from making 30-second review videos for you guys every freaking day. You know, like, look at our faces. Look at me. I look like I'm like in rehab or something, you know, like it's tough.
Happy 31 days of Halloween. There's gin in here.
Yes, we are here to discuss the first 3 episodes of The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is on Netflix right now. And guys, before we get into that though, I just want to tell you, I'm about to watch Silence of the Lambs for the first time. And I just want to know, how is it? Is it worth it?
So I got a really quick, I felt so bad because the person who posted that like responded to my comment and was like, I'm only 17 and I'm just getting into horror. And I was like, ugh. And I was like, I'm really sorry. I had a rough work day and posts like that usually drive me nuts. And I was like, you really should check out the movie and also watch the Hannibal TV series. It's excellent. She was like, oh, thank you so much. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go put my head in the dirt now. So thank you.
So listen, young buck, you start with Hannibal Rising and then you go.
Well, like seriously, when you're like on these like horror themed Facebook groups or Twitter feeds and somebody's like, so Exorcist, yes or no? Should I watch it? And you're like, what? Like, this is like universally known to be the greatest horror movie of all time, and you're asking a horror community if you not is it good, but should I watch it? Like, come on.
Yes.
Yeah. Get in the game.
Yeah. So that was kind of the buzz today, that Danny was talking about. But, you should follow these 2 guys on Twitter because just as passionate as they are about horror movies, like they just always have these really energetic, fun posts too. So Danny is at Dr. ZaiusGoD and Chris is at Future Boy Chris. And
yes, I'm Future Boy Chris, the guy who just took a box of tissues out of the frame because people are weird and get weird ideas, but now I just realized they made it more weird. These were for legitimate reasons, and now by moving them, it's a thing, and I'm sorry, it's a thing.
I can vouch for Chris. I could vouch for Chris. He did post on Facebook today that he was looking for an allergist. So
yes,
okay, there you go.
This is my living room. I'm not an animal.
All right, we're a little off the rails tonight, but it's all good. Before we get started with our deep dive, though, there's one last thing. I just also wanted to do a happy birthday shout out to our mutual friend Brian. We wouldn't know each other if it wasn't for Brian. Brian is a good friend of all of ours. He, you guys might see him if you ever watch my Anchor Pete channel. He does a show called Ramblings from the Rod Pod. He's been on a couple of times, but just Brian's awesome, man. I just want to say happy birthday to him.
Happy birthday, Brian.
Nice. So with that being said, I think it's time for us to go back to our roots and get a little Mike Flanagan on, and we can talk about The Haunting of Bly Manor. I have watched 3 episodes so far. Danny, how many have you watched?
So I watched the first 3 episodes twice, once to take notes, and then I just finished episodes 4 and 5 right before I got on with you.
Nice. Okay. And Chris?
I have watched the entire series, and I rewatched the first 3 episodes because listen, we're fountains of knowledge here to a degree. We have to take notes. Yes. So I wanted to take this in, no distractions the first time around, and knowing that I was going to go back, rewatch it for our discussions and take notes. And I'm that's not going to stop me from rewatching these over and over and over again. They're just we'll get into it.
Yeah. Nice. So the first episode is called The Great Good Place.
Danny, Victoria Pedretti's character, who was the bent neck lady, Nell from Haunting of Hill House, she goes for a job interview with Henry Wingrave, played by Henry Thomas, to become the au pair of these 2 young kids. It's basically Turn of the Screw by Henry James. And the show, actually, I forgot, the show actually starts at a wedding ceremony where, surprise, Carla Gugino, another Mike Flanagan alum, ends up becoming the storyteller of a ghost story to the married couple and their guests, the husband of which is played by Greg Sestero, famous for "Oh, hi, Mark, The Room."
Like, he's Mark in The Room?
He is Mark from The Room. Yes.
I have in my notes, holy shit, it's Mark from The Room.
Wow.
Yes. And the series opens with a quote from a poem from the movie The Innocents, which is one of the most famous interpretations of Turn of the Screw done. It was one of 1961 black and white horror film that I have not seen and that I am going to find on VOD as soon as I finish Bly Manor.
Yes.
But Danny Clayton, Victoria Pedretti's character, she finally gets the job. We find out very quickly that she has some ghosts in her past. One of them with very glowy eyes that seems to be following her in mirrors.
Yes.
And she ends up at this gorgeous estate, driven there by a wonderful driver / chef played by what's his name? Rahul Kohli, who is in iZombie, a show that I watched with my wife for a while.
Oh, okay.
And she just meets these adorable, incredibly acted children, and the story just goes from there. And of course, it's a Mike Flanagan work, so based on Henry James's Turn of the Screw. So there's going to be some haunted stuff. There's going to be some hidden ghosts, and there's going to be a lot of emotional baggage to everybody.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good intro, I guess.
I think you did a good job. Yeah. I was going to ask either of you guys, maybe Chris, like, do they ever explicitly say the year of when Danny is at Bly Manor?
1987.
They say it. Okay.
Yeah, the wedding is 2007, so they go back to 1987. The wedding where Carla Gugino starts to narrate this ghost story. So they go back 20 years, 1987 to London, and that's where we meet Danny, and stuffy functioning alcoholic Brit, Henry Wingrave.
Yes. Yeah. Now I was going to ask you about that. That was my first thing that kind of struck me. How do you guys feel about the accents in this show? Because there's quite a few actors that are either doing like a British accent or a Scottish accent. How do you feel that they did?
I got to admit, Henry Thomas, overall, thanks to Mike Flanagan, who's really put him more in the spotlight the last few years, continues to surprise me.
Right. From
his overall performances to, he's not just doing, and I'm by no means an expert on a British dialect, but his British accent is very specific. Like, I don't know enough about it to pinpoint it, but I'm like, that is a very specific British accent.
Right.
And he's terrific. I find that most of them are I don't really find shaky at all. If anything, I find Victoria Pedretti's manic, somewhat southern. Yeah. Her delivery of it's a little, I don't want to call it shaky. Yeah. I think it's just us getting used to what her character is.
Yeah.
And it's a character who you immediately know she realizes that she is brave, but she also reins herself in at times. So it's almost conflicting. It's almost a bit of a split personality, for lack of a better phrase. You know, you find herself, she's like, almost like, now you listen here. And then she'll like, she'll leap forward and then pull herself back a little bit. So it's not just her, it's her accent, it's her entire personality.
Interesting, yeah.
I was gonna say, she and Pete, you'll understand this, I think, as well. She gives off a really good teacher vibe.
Yes.
And she's in the show, like, one of her tactics to getting this job is talking to Henry Thomas's character about how she was a teacher and she's used to handling 25 plus kids in a classroom.
Right.
So she leaped at the opportunity to only have to deal with 2, even as a full-time live-in au pair. And I just loved, like, there are certain parts of this, even these first 3 episodes, where she's like so friendly and so loving, and then all of a sudden one of the kids does something and like she snaps into teacher mode. And being a teacher myself, and I know you, it like, it's like, oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
I know that. So I thought she did really good at that.
She's great. She's great with the children. It's interesting how she, again, because it's that split personality of fear and courage with her, and with the children, it's such a different dynamic, because with adults, it's like she nervously challenges Henry in his office at the bar. You know, she's up to the task of challenging someone, but she does it like she's not. There's a nervousness about it.
Interesting. She is haunted, right, by this apparition or whatever it is. I don't even know, because I've only watched 3 episodes, right? And it's at the very end of the 3rd episode. But it's like you said, Danny, it's, this ghost or something that has these like bright, flashy eyes, and they're like glasses, basically. And it kind of reminds me, for comic book fans out there, there's this really great comic written by Scott Snyder, that is when Dick Grayson is Batman, filling in for Bruce, and Commissioner Gordon's son, who you never really hear about, is a killer, and he's this very scary, cold killer, and he has those glasses where every time you see him in a frame, even though he's just wearing regular glasses, the way they draw him, it's always like his eyes are glowing like that, and it's very creepy. And with that, I feel like this show kind of has parallels to Hill House, because a lot of the times the ghosts on Hill House were like the ghosts of childhood traumas. And I'm assuming that we're going to find that this is connected to some kind of traumatic event that she went through, that Danny went through when she was younger.
We're not going to spoil like past episode 3, but you do find out who and what this all represents. I refer to him as glowy eyes in my notes.
Glowy eyes. Yeah.
But I also just wanted to make, like, you mentioned the accents before. Emily B. Smith, or Amelie B. Smith, who plays Flora.
Yeah.
This might come across as being creepy, but please understand this is coming from somebody who has a 9.5-year-old daughter. I want to adopt her. I love her so much. And when she, like, from the first time she opens her mouth and starts talking, I was like, oh my God, she's the cutest thing in the world. And I walked into the kitchen while my daughter was eating, and I said, perfectly splendid. And I hear my daughter's friends through the iPad go, is your dad making like a Peppa Pig joke? And I went, oh my God, because she is the voice of Peppa Pig.
Oh my God.
And it blew my mind that they they got because I hate Peppa Pig so damn much. But I love the human form of Peppa Pig, if that makes sense. You have daughters, so Peppa Pig is a horribly annoying show.
Yeah.
But Peppa Pig in human form is just the most adorable little girl I can imagine.
Yeah.
Aside from you.
I did not. Oh, there she is. Hello.
Hey, Charlotte.
I did not know that was the same actress in Peppa Pig, but I had that feeling when I was hearing her voice. I was like, that's Peppa Pig, right? So
yeah. Flora is absolutely adorable, and then she looks past Danny's shoulder constantly and scares the shit out of you.
Yeah,
because there's something behind Danny that only she can see.
Yes. So maybe we should talk about the kids then in general. The kids, their acting and their characters. Because there is Flora, but then there's also her brother too, and Miles. I obviously there's more to his character than what I've seen, but he is the scarier of the two, I thought.
Yeah. Benjamin Evans Ainsworth is the actor who plays him. I'm 5 episodes in, and they are in the running for best children performances that I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Because like Chris just alluded, what the girl who plays Flora, it's Amelie B. Smith, what she can do, looking as adorable as she is, and then just looking past you, and the way that instantly, because think about, like, if anyone was talking to you and then looked over your shoulder and you turned around and nobody was there, you'd be freaked out.
Yes.
And she does that perfectly. But the boy who plays Miles, I wrote down, he reminded me of Damien in The Omen. He just has that blank British face, and he has the ability to be both charming but really freaking evil at the same time.
You know, I think all the adult actors are great as well, besides, you know, Danny. I think that, you know, Henry Thomas is great, but then the other people that are living at the manor, I don't recognize those actors from other shows or movies.
No. I was excited getting to know characters like Owen. Owen is immediately somebody you fall in love with as a character. Like, he's terrific, full of wonderful puns that just get better as they go on.
Yeah.
Then my immediate exposure to him, I was so happy. I'm like, he's in Midnight Mass. I'm already thrilled that he's going to be in Flanagan's next project, Midnight Mass. But you have a feeling that Owen is very sincere and open and honest, and Hannah is the same, though distracted. She's very distracted. She's always kind of staring off and, you know, immediately apologetic about it. But you get the same warmth from both of them, aside from a couple differences.
Yeah. And
Tanaya Miller's, she's fantastic. Hannah, she's the live-in housekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, Owen, I know from iZombie. I love Jamie, who's the gardener, played by Amelia Eve. She looks like Kate McKinnon.
Yes, yeah.
And she has the same kind of, like, just the way she, like, smirks at the camera, like, not at the camera, but she has this great smirk and, like, a sarcastic tone to her face, which sounds like I'm insulting her, but I'm totally not.
Yeah.
And she's great. Like, it's just, you know, not to glow on Flanagan, but it's a typically perfectly casted Mike Flanagan work where everybody just seems to fit perfectly into the role they've been assigned. And, you know, like with typical Flanagan work, they all have, you know, expanded stories that we find out, you know, as the episodes start to go on and on.
Yeah.
I checked the IMDb for Danny's mom jeans and didn't see a lot in there, but definitely been around for at least 3 or 4 decades.
Yes.
Speaking of Kate McKinnon, Saturday Night Live.
They were the star of every scene. I believe it was the 2nd or 3rd day she was there.
Yeah.
Whoa.
You know, it's funny because, like, when I watched the first episode, I was so tired and I was like kind of like not paying as much attention as I could. And my wife was asking me, she's like, you know, what's up with how she's dressed? I was like, oh, she's just like a hipster, you know, she's got like hipster clothes on. And then she's like, wait a minute, isn't this like in the 80s? Like, this is a flashback. Well, I kept thinking it was 2007. I'm like, oh yeah, she's a hipster, you know? So, like, luckily my wife kind of put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, very, very quickly. I just want to touch on too how open Danny is as a character. How you get such a feel for her in that first episode. It does not take long at all. The scene where Hannah is telling Danny about the character of Miss Jessel, about Rebecca Jessel. I mean, Victoria Pedretti is standing there with her tear. It looks like she's about to tear at any moment. Her eyes are so welled up. You can tell she's such an empath. You know, she's, you know, the way she talks about the kids to Henry Wingrave, about how she sincerely loves them all, and she hates that she can't devote the time and attention to them that she wants to. I mean, this is just such a wonderful and warm character.
Yeah, yeah, and yet haunted too. You know, and it's interesting because like this show, it has kind of some complaints I've seen, and maybe it's just articles like where they just want to catch you, you know, like clickbait shit, right? But like some people have said it doesn't have scares. One complaint I saw today on Twitter was it's just a bunch of love stories, right? And to me, that bothered me because I'm like, that probably is James Joyce's work. Like he probably has a bunch of tragic love stories in his.
But
Go ahead.
I compared this to. I'll be brief. To having a conversation with someone today. I basically said, and in my reaction on my channel, I said, take Haunting of Hill House, turn it into a scale, slightly tone down the scares, and slightly turn up the emotion, and I think you have Bly Manor. I don't think they're as different as people claim they are in retrospect. I think people remember the things that really stand out in Hill House, and they're now comparing to this entire season that they just watched of a brand new story. They're really not that far off. To say it's not scary, again, we're just discussing the first 3 episodes tonight. To say the show isn't scary, it's like, well, what's your definition of scary? It's scary and horror and what's creepy. It's specific to the individual.
Yeah.
You know, my girlfriend is terrified of movies like Dark Skies and Fire in the Sky, movies about aliens, about grays, about gangly humanoid aliens. That doesn't scare a lot of people. It fucking terrifies her.
Yeah.
So horror is very specific. And I said to someone today, I'm like, we're adults. What's more horrific than losing the people you love, you know, the children you love, the people, you know, your blood family, your found family? What's more horrendous? What keeps you up at night? What scares the shit out of you than something happening to those people or losing those people? I was like, so define scary for me, because I watched this show and it has elements of it that fucking terrify me when I apply them to real life.
And the thing with Flanagan is, you know, Pete, you said, oh, it's just a collection of love stories. We've done in-depth reviews of Absentia, Oculus, and Hush.
Right.
Almost all of his work is character-driven stuff.
Yeah.
Danny,
where the character.
That's Hill House.
Yeah.
Hill House, they may not be romantic, but Hill House is a collection of love stories.
100%.
Family love, relationships. So when people say that, I'm like, what are you saying? Like,
and it's also people, I think when they say it's not scary, I think we've been conditioned to assume scare goes to like leap out of your seat moments.
Yeah.
Whereas Flanagan has always been, and I think what first really drew me to him as a director was nobody else working right now in horror, aside from, I felt this way in Hereditary, but really that's one of the only movies. Just this impending sense of total dread.
Yeah.
And you feel that when you're watching Flanagan work. And even the episodes that he doesn't write and direct, he's the EP. He's in charge of everything. Nothing is going on, I'm assuming, without his direct, you know, input along the way. And there's so many scenes where things are happening and you see things, and it's just, if you watch The Haunting of Hill House, you know you're watching every inch of the screen because of, and it's just like, the fuck is going to happen now? It's like, and there's so many long shots in this huge empty house. There's so much space to look for.
Yeah.
And it, to me, that is scary. It's scary. Like I'm not sitting there biting my nails, shaking, but I'm sitting there and I'm feeling the dread that these characters must be feeling.
Yeah.
Because I like living in I live in a 4-room, 2-bedroom apartment. And part of me likes that because there's nowhere anybody can hide.
Yeah.
Like if I lived in Bly Manor, I would be terrified every minute of the day.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that it's like because of the way that our media has evolved too, right? Because you get all of Bly Manor in one shot. You know, you could watch it on your phone if you wanted to. I watched the third episode in preparation for this a couple hours ago, you know, in my dining room just by myself, and it just doesn't have that atmosphere, you know. But if we were watching this in a theater, you know, if you're watching the right scenario, you would it enhances it all. But I feel like with Netflix, it's just like such a commodity now that when you watch things, you're just kind of scrolling through it. You're paying half attention to it. This is not the kind of media that you can pay half attention to. You know, it's the kind of thing where it works better if you're really just sitting there to appreciate the characters and you let the horror come to you versus like, oh, where's the scary part? Where's the scary part? You know, like go watch something else.
That's what I think people. I think people remember those moments from Hill House. They remember all of the Nell moments, all of the big, incredibly well executed jump scares, and then they just apply. People just apply moments to this entire new thing they're watching, and like Haunting of Hill House was so much scarier. It's like, as a whole, was it really?
Yeah.
You know.
Also, and I think horror gets shit on a lot as a genre because in horror, the movies are very often only judged by if they scared you or not. And you're not expected in horror to have well-developed, well thought-out emotional characters. So people are like, well, I'm watching a horror show. I don't want to watch these characters have an in-depth conversation. And meanwhile, we're watching it, and I know from my point of view, I loved watching just Owen and Hannah kind of flirt without flirting for episodes on end. I loved watching Danny and Jamie kind of flirt on and off, and there's all of these like subtle character moments that if this was just a drama series, we would be raving about. But it's a horror series, so why aren't we getting scared? And it's like, well, there's it's like 9 hours long, you know.
Yeah. I expect that from people who are just like, it's October and it's spooky. It's like, listen, I get it. You're into this one time of the year, and that's awesome. It's something that us as horror fans can celebrate with even more people.
Right.
But it drives me nuts when horror fans boil entire films down and to those moments, and those moments make it make or break for them.
Yeah.
Like you should know better. You know, like don't disparage an entire film because you weren't completely on board with what their version of scares were. It's so much more than that.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because like what is your version of scary? I felt like there was something very scary with Miles in the second episode. Like I felt like there was stuff that was scarier in there than like the haunting atmosphere of the first episode. Like you mentioned Damien before, Danny, right? Like from the Omen.
Oh yeah.
And like I was totally getting Omen vibes in the second episode, man. So in the second episode, we basically see where Miles was, where he goes to boarding school. And and so while he's there, he befriends one of the priests at the school, right? Because it's like a religious school, and the priest has like this faith in him. He thinks that like that Miles is kind of troubled, but he believes that Miles can ultimately, you know, overcome this and be better. And it just seems like Miles is constantly doing things that's going to get him sent home, basically, or get him kicked out of the school. And he does some pretty upsetting things. There's one part where he's hanging in a tree and he just lets himself drop. That was pretty damn disturbing. There's another part at the very end where he brings a dead bird to the priest, right? And you know, he's just basically trying to get home. And you find out he said this one expression later that he wanted to find the key to the priest. And that's an expression that gets referenced in the third episode as well. So I mean, there's things that happen at the manor too, but to me, that storyline really stood out in the second episode.
Yeah, the priest is played by Jim Piddock, I think is how you pronounce his name. And I wrote that down because I thought he was excellent.
Yes.
Just in this one episode. And Mike Flanagan really does a good job, right? Or his work has a lot of good priests. Henry Thomas plays a really good priest in Ouija Origin of Evil.
Oh, okay.
But I loved one thing that you skipped over was he starts doing all these bad things after he gets a letter from home, and we find out at the end that the letter is just a drawing from Flora that says "come home," and there's 3 people in the in the drawing. One of them is her, one of them is him, and then there's another drawing. And so he's doing all these things, but with purpose.
And I didn't mention that one of the things that he did was that he got into a fight with another student at the campus, and he was basically suffocating him too. That really bothered me.
He has a good rear naked choke for a kid with a broken arm.
Benjamin Evan Ainsworth really shines in this episode, though. He has some wonderful moments when he says to the priest, why, talking about his parents, why did they, he's asking the priest questions about demons and possession,
right?
And asks the priest, why, talking about his parents, why did the bad ones get to come back but not the good ones? So you pay attention to that. You're like, what's, it's all, again, layers of the onion, just, and then the, killing the bird, jumping out of the tree, choking his friend who he just had this wonderful moment with. I mean, what a contrast. What an incredible, to have this, this loving friend, his bunkmate. And then the next scene, he's just like, unbelievable. He's such a terrific little actor. You're getting the vibe in this episode that Miles is, by this point, you're getting a vibe that he's slightly off. Yeah. Mannerisms change at times, slightly is putting it lightly. When he mentions things in class, like he said, besides inquiring about possession, he also says dead doesn't mean gone. When he finally does the final thing that gets him thrown out of school. He under his breath, he says, dead doesn't mean gone. And you're like, okay, something's, and listen, we're watching a show called The Haunting of, so we already know something else is going on.
Right.
And then after that, we're found back at the house, and we get another appearance from the glasses spirit, for lack of a better phrase, which is just striking and is such a Flanagan creation. There, I mean, it's just 1 or 2 appearances in episode 1. I mean, 6 minutes in episode 1, we get the first appearance of this specter. And then there's a great shot in episode 1 where Danny is leaving her hostel, her apartment room, and it's multiple shots. They throw a mirror in every shot, and bam, right before she leaves the room, it's there. You're like, oh my God. Not a sound, mind you. Great jump scare, not a sound. It's just, it's just right there. That's Flanagan. And that's him. You still see things like that because even though he only directed the 1 episode, he is godfathering this project.
Yeah.
But we'll get into the amazing work that all of these directors do down the line in this series.
Yeah. I think it's pronounced Ciaran or Sharon.
Ciaran Hines?
No, it's Ciaran Foy. Ciaran Hines is the actor from Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah. And from
name though, yeah. Ciaran Foy.
Show, the Terror.
Did I get this right? Did his brother James Flanagan write episode 2?
I keep seeing James Flanagan's name pop up at the end of every episode, but like an idiot, that's the only thing I'm not paying attention to for some reason.
Yeah, I saw Flanagan, and I just assumed it was Mike Flanagan.
I thought it was James who wrote episode 2.
Yeah.
I don't know if his name shows up in the credits of almost every episode.
Yeah.
So I think he's maybe, it's like an outline guy. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Just one other point I wanted to make about episode 2 was that we learned a little bit more about Hannah too. She's in the chapel of the manor, and she's lit some candles, and Danny comes and finds her, and she explains that this is a ritual that she does pretty much on a daily basis, and it's to honor the dead. And it's 3 candles lit, right? Or is it 4? I think it was 3.
I think it's 3.
It was 4.
Is it 4? Yeah, it's
Okay.
4.
There's 4 candles lit. And so, we just get a little, glimpse into her personality. And we know that obviously something has traumatized her as well. And one thing that we didn't mention, I think this is in the first episode, is that there's a wing of the house that's closed off because that was the wing where the parents lived, or their bedroom was. And Danny at one point is on the grounds, and she looks up on the balcony of where the parents would be, and she sees a man. And so that was a pretty important part of the first 3 episodes, And we see that man, as far as I can tell. We see a glimpse of him in the end of the second episode when she's with the 2 children, and Miles, he starts to feel ill, and he's looking out the window, and there's a face there outside in the storm, and it's just kind of flickering like a ghost, and it is this man that I think was standing on the balcony as well, right? And then that was Oliver Johnson Cohen, right?
Jackson-Cohen, yeah. He's the he was the drug-addled brother in Hill House, and he was the Invisible Man, and he is very quickly cornering the market on asshole, gaslighting, abusive boyfriends.
Oh yes.
I'm starting to think he might know that character a little too well, but he's really good at playing that character.
Yes.
Yeah. Between Invisible Man and this show, wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good segue into episode 3, because he's kind of the focus of episode 3.
Absolutely. Yeah. So episode 3, we have essentially a flashback within a flashback, right? Because now we're going back to a time when Miss Jessel is still alive. And we see her go through the process that Danny went through, where she's basically interviewing with Henry. And we see the difference between her interview and his interview. And we also learn of Henry's partner, who is Peter Quint, right? And so Peter Quint is a pretty cool, collected guy. He's a sharp dresser, and he has a Scottish accent. So what do you guys think of that Scottish accent?
I was pleasantly surprised, and that's a tough one. That is one that is easy to scrutinize, to agonize over, and you're just like, you better fucking nail this. This is a type. If you're gonna go full, come on, But I was distracted by the fact that I thought it was going to turn into a Kingsman spinoff very quickly, but it did not.
Yes.
And again, that character is just, you look at him and douchebag is the first word that you can't, there's really no way around it. It's very, the veil is thin of the, and we meet Rebecca Jessel, and we learn that our new favorite phrase, perfectly splendid, originates from her. It's the first thing she says to Flora when she arrives at Bly. And again, like Danny, just this incredibly warm human being, a typical Flanagan character.
Chris, you're the Disney, you're the Disney person. I'm sure you've seen Mary Poppins more than I have. Is Perfectly Splendid a Mary Poppins thing? Because when Rebecca Jessel gets there, I thought Flora says, "You're on new Mary Poppins," and that's when she says, "Yes, I'm perfectly splendid." And it just made me think that was a tie-in to Mary Poppins, because then also Jamie refers to Danny continuously as Poppins, which is just hilarious to me when she, the gardener, refers to Danny.
I'll tell you how much of a Disney fan I am. I was more of a Bedknobs and Broomsticks kid.
Yes, you are correct. That is the correct opinion.
That I was a Mary Poppins kid. I could count on less than one hand how many times I've seen Mary Poppins, believe it or not.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I've seen Bedknobs and Broomsticks probably, a dozen times.
My mother was a huge Murder, She Wrote fan, and between that and Mrs. Teacup in Beauty and the Beast, I loved Angela Lansbury, so I also watched Bedknobs and Broomsticks countless times.
Excellent.
Yeah. Well, someone's bed knob gets polished in this episode too.
Oh. that is definitely on the list of all-time greatest segues I've ever heard.
That was great.
I always have to think of a segue to move things forward, So I'm like, all right, well.
Oh.
So anyway,
from downtown. Holy shit.
So
fantastic.
So Peter Quint meets Miss Jessel as she's going to get interviewed, and they have a connection right away. And as the episode goes, we go through the episode, you see that their relationship deepens, right? And he brings flowers to the manor at one point. He goes to give them to Flora. You assume that he's going to give them to Miss Jessel, but he gives them to Flora. And Miles is kind of confused by that. He says, why are you doing this? And that's where Peter has that speech where he talks about people have keys, right? And that you can unlock, you just have to find the thing that's basically going to unlock them. And he said how Henry, the uncle, his key is money. He said for women, most of them, it's flowers, right? And so he says that you have to figure out the people's keys. Then that's kind of what connects episode 2 and this episode. So they eventually have a love affair, and they have it like right on the manor. And we have a sex scene, which I haven't seen in too many Flanagan movies either. We have like basically 2 scenes. There's one scene where, he's Peter's going to stay at the manor, and Miss Jessel basically just brings him into her bedroom, and he spends the night. Then there's this other scene that was kind of hard for me to watch because he invites her to the wing of the house that the parents used to live in, and he gives her the mother's fur, and he says, okay, you have to the best way to wear a fur is to feel it on your skin. So she takes off her clothes and she puts on the fur, and I'm just sitting there thinking, oh man, like any minute now we're either gonna get a ghost or a little kid or one of the staff, someone's gonna bust them, and of course Miss Hannah does.
Like the last person in that house you want to bust you in there is Hannah.
The tension between Oliver Jackson-Cohen and Tanaya Miller is so palpable, but you could just tell she loves, she was hired by the parents, and she's now like the one that's been there the longest. Yeah. So she that like she almost feels ownership of this house. Hannah, even though she's the housekeeper, she's been there probably longer than anybody else, and it's just like, that scene was very difficult to watch. I wrote down also because you mentioned like this episode, we see the flashback within the flashback. And it made me think about Oculus and something that we talked about in our Oculus review, about how hard it is to do time jumping and dual timelines effectively.
Yes.
And Flanagan, again, between like Oculus and this, and then there's also if you watch Gerald's Game, does that a little bit also. He loves to play with time.
Yeah.
And blend time. So like that scene that you mentioned where Rebecca Jessel opens up her bedroom door and there's Peter Quint, and she just grabs him, and they shut the door, so you don't see anything. But then the door opens and Danny walks out.
Right.
And that's just the au pair's room, and it's just different timeline. Okay, and now we're back to Danny's story, and it's also seamless.
Yes.
And I can get like my dad is up to episode 8, and my dad is notorious. Chris will know this. unfortunately, I gained the nickname the Ruiner amongst my friends for a while, because I would accidentally end up spoiling movies. And I got that directly from my father. Like, my father is just the worst at that. So my father's like, "Oh, did you finish Bly Manor?" I'm like, "No, I'm only up to episode 3. And he's like, "Oh, I just finished episode 8. And let me ask you," and I hung up the phone on him. And I texted him and I said, "No, like, you're not doing this."
That's a generational thing. You have to just cut them off.
Yeah. And like, he was gonna, he texted me back and he was like, "Yeah, I was gonna ask you, there's a lot of time jumping things and I was getting confused and I wanted you to help me figure stuff out." I'm like, "I'll talk to you about it in like 3 days."
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, there's a great example in that episode too that it really reminded me of Oculus. It's when Flora is out by the water and she's like talking to herself, and you're thinking, oh, she's gonna go see a ghost, and then she turns like she's gonna see a ghost, but then it cuts back to a scene where Miss Jessel's still alive. And so you're kind of sitting there for a second, and you're like, is she talking to Miss Jessel as a ghost, or is this the past? And then when you see the other people, you see Miles and Peter Quint, and you're like, oh, it's the past. But it really reminded me of Oculus right there with like the time overlapping. You know.
I also love the earlier on in the episode, Flora wants to make a doll for Miss Jessel, and Flora, what colors do you like? And Miss Rebecca says, "I love all the colors." So later on, they're sitting by the lake, and she's like, like, "Why am I in black?" And he's like, "Well, Miles says that if you put all the colors together, it makes black." And what caps off that scene is you seeing now, which is now confirmed for us, Miss Jessel across the lake, dressed in black. So I was like, okay, well, now we know for sure. And I'm not sure if it comes before or after that. We get the what I refer to as the red flag boyfriend after school special. That is Peter Quint freaking out on Rebecca after they all have a moment in the kitchen where Owen is making a cake and they all taste the batter, and Peter Quint just goes full on like, let's cut it. Let's time to cut and run. And, and it's not going to go great from there.
He finds like 17 different ways to have metaphors for oral sex in that conversation. He's like, yeah. And she's like, he just wanted me to taste his batter. He's like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. He finds as many
in your mouth. It's like that, like he gets real fucking train spotting, like really hard.
He gets as many innuendos about that as Owen does puns about battering people.
Oh, man. That was rough.
As somebody who has a dad joke shirt and who gets yelled at by his students and eye rolled by his students for their dad jokes, I appreciated that.
What you don't know yet is that all of the ghosts in the house, they all died from rolling their eyes into the back of their head because of all of Owen's puns, but not me, because I would just, and I roll my eyes at every pun, but for some reason Owen's delivery of them, I'm like, Owen, come on, he's the best.
Something we haven't mentioned that it reminded me when Pete was talking about Flora in front of the lake. There's just so many gorgeous shots in this show, and we're only talking about the first 3 episodes.
Yeah.
But there's the very first scene in the first episode where Danny like walks from the car because she wants to walk onto this land, and she comes over this like little hill, and just it's Flora in front of the lake with this epic view. It's just there's so many shots like that in each of the episodes that are just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then in the house also, because there's so much expansive territory within the house, like the continuous shots, the room to room shots, and of course because it's Flanagan and it's a haunting show, they're always lurking about, you're always looking into the backgrounds of all these shots, looking for things.
Yeah.
It's just, oh man. But yeah, Oliver Jackson-Cohen in this episode, he really turns the whole series on a dime with that one scene in the bedroom. Like nothing was really, there was some dread and there was some creepy moments, but there was nothing unsettling, like really like that made you like wince in an unsettling way until that scene. And then that scene really turns the whole show.
Yeah.
I felt like, so.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think the scene that you're talking about, Danny, because Chris, when you said the thing about the after school special, the red light, I thought you were talking about that particular scene where he wants her to stay in the bed with him. And she goes to get up to do her job, and he grabs her, and he's like, "Come to bed."
Oh no, that I wrote down. I was like, Invisible Man vibes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Danny, you were just talking about like things in the frame and stuff, and I know that like Hill House is notorious for having all these ghosts throughout it, and I know you wanted to talk about that tonight. Let's start that discussion. And I was going to ask you guys right off the top. In like the first episode, there is like almost like a plague doctor ghost, right?
Yeah.
And it's standing out of focus behind them when they're by the lake, right?
There are a ton of plague doctor. I'm sorry, Danny. Do you want to?
Oh no, I mean go ahead.
I think by the end of episode 1, it's one of those like I watched it all, so now I have to go back and I'm like I don't want to say too. But by the end of episode 1, it's pretty much defined as that's what it is. You really get a good by like the last hidden plague doctor, like you get the shape and you're like that is a plague doctor. That is the full suit. But you see him a lot, and the thing I love about Flanagan directing that first episode and something that carries through, you expect to go back to these shots and have it be gone like it would in any other film, and it's not.
Leaves
them there.
And there's scenes like that, you know, to piggyback on what you said, because I'm standing there and the scenes are brightly lit, and the balls to do, like you're used to, again, this is horror 101, is when it's dark, you do scary things.
Yeah.
Flanagan's like, no, it's the morning, the sun's just come out, everything is lit up. So when she comes down the stairs for breakfast, we're going to have a creepy fucking ghost in the background, and she's going to be there the entire shot. You know, the plague doctor shows up for the first time, I think. I was writing down timestamps of the ghosts. Yeah. So I don't want to spoil all of them, but it's like 21 minutes into the first episode, and it's when Flora is showing Danny the house, and she shows her up the stairs. The plague doctor is off to the right, and at first, my first thought watching it was, what a weird statue. Because this is an old freaking mansion. I'm like, what a weird thing to have in their house. And then you just see the slightest movement. And you're talking like you might think if you're watching it, you imagined it, but it freaking moves. And you're like, okay, here we go. And one of those great shots that I was talking about is at the end of the first episode when Danny runs outside and it's like this smoky, foggy night, and you just stare out onto the manor. You can see the nose of the plague doctor's mask standing out in the background. Like, it's fucking epic, man. Oh,
watching it twice, I still managed to miss a couple of them. There's one brightly lit kitchen, lunchtime. He's inside the fireplace. Didn't even catch it. Both times I watched the thing after it. I'm like, oh my God, I missed that. The one by the staircase, missed that one. And then there's one, one of my favorites is because it breaks that rule I just spoke about staying in those shots, but also keeps it as well. When Danny is speaking to Miles is in his bedroom, Danny's speaking to him. There are 3 shots. There's 2 shots on Danny, and there's 1 shot on Miles. They keep going back and forth. The plague doctor is standing there in 1 shot with Danny, but in the other shot with Danny, where you should be able to see him even better, he's not there. It fucks with your brain so much.
Yeah. Oh,
there's scenes where doors are like they keep cutting back to characters having conversations, and Door's here, and then it's here, and then it's here. Every time they cut back to that character, I'm like, this fucking attention to detail is so great.
And it makes you watch it makes you do what most streaming shows can't do, and that's it makes you focus on every part of the screen. No part of the screen is safe. And that's what I meant before when I said it's just this impending sense of dread, because every scene she's running from one room to the house, down a staircase, around a hallway, going through doors, and you're just expecting, because you know Mike Flanagan, because you know Haunting of Hill House, you're just expecting there's gonna be a fucking ghost in this hallway. Oh wow, there's nothing there. I really thought there'd be. Oh shit, there's something there. Son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And it gets you all the time, and it actually makes you like. I can't tell you how many times rewatching these 3 episodes where I sat with my Roku remote, just fast forward, play, because I like, did I see that?
Yeah.
And also, we didn't mention, but Flora has a dollhouse.
Yeah, that's kind of important too.
And we mentioned one of the dolls. I think Chris mentioned the doll of Miss Jessel, but she has dolls for every character.
Every ghost.
And every ghost also. There is a plague doctor doll in her dollhouse.
Yep. I know.
And again, as the father of a daughter, dollhouse has creeped the shit out of me. Yeah, my favorite episode of Shudder's Creepshow series from season 1 was about the haunted dollhouse.
Fantastic.
And so they're just that. You know, I think that was also like growing up with Nightmare on Elm Street, and everybody always had the 1428 Elm Street house in like made out of popsicle sticks, and the lights were always going on. I was all right, forget it. Like, come on.
We get 2 other spirits in these episodes too. We get the ghost, looks to be the ghost of a child, in 2 different shots.
Right.
You know, which in that house could be a statue, like you wouldn't even know. And we get a moaning attic ghost.
How about that?
That is just the sounds just fucking shoot through you.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, and it seems to like be singing along with her too. It kind of reminds me of that scene in Shaun of the Dead when they're right.
Yeah.
There's also a soldier ghost that lurks in the background.
Yeah.
There's a few. And you know, like, and the wonderful thing is, if you don't see these, it doesn't take away anything from the show. But if you do see them, it adds so much.
That's right.
Yeah. And if you didn't see them, go back and rewatch it and pay more attention. Put your phone down. Tell your kids to leave you the hell alone.
Yeah. So you know what, guys, that sounds like a kind of a good point to like wrap it up for tonight. I'm sure there's like a ton more we can keep talking about, but luckily we're gonna have 2 more episodes of this where we can talk about episodes 4, 5, and 6, and then we'll eventually talk about episodes 7 through 9, and we're gonna do it once a week. You know, normally we do it every 2 weeks, but we're doing this shit once a week now. So you guys down for meet up again next week?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We also have a big interview planned for next week with the director of In Search of Darkness. Isn't that Tuesday?
I'm very glad you brought that up. So then, next week is not Bly Manor, but next week we get to meet with the director of In Search of Darkness. So that's
David Weiner, I think his name is. It's either David Weiner or Weiner. I will have to. Yeah.
So yeah, that's next Tuesday we're gonna record. So it'll probably be up by like Thursday. Awesome to be getting these people that are in the horror community coming and being on our show, you know, and that's because you guys keep watching. So we appreciate you guys, and just keep watching Last Cast channel, and we will see you guys real soon. All right, so let me just stop the recording.